Welcome everybody to the CRC weekly meeting. Today is February 9th, 2014. And we've got a lot to do, a lot to cover, so we'll try and do that in a strategic fashion. The first thing I'd point out, judging by our audience as well, who decided to come today, LaRouche has been really attacking this point of popular opinion, that people are really victims of their own opinions that somebody has basically put in their head. These are not. We're not the average population. We're not talking about sovereign people. We're not talking about people who have the ability to generate their own concepts. We're talking about people who reference and refer to certain, bodies, the official bodies and the standard reviews and takes on different things going on in the world, and this is how they shape their worldview. They don't have the ability for themselves to generate, a concept that allows them to understand the world. They get it from somewhere, and that's the big problem. So I'd really start by just reading the opening of LaRouche's latest paper called Countdown, and I believe it was like February 4th or something, and he basically said, you should be acting like right now there's like a 26-day countdown, the month of February, towards a sort of, breakout of conflict, an extinction conflict. That's really where LaRouche is saying you have to keep your eyes open. This thing is, unfolding now. And as we're going to see with the developments in Ukraine and all that, that's exactly the case. But I'd start just by reading this, and LaRouche is being a bit, he's being very straightforward in a sense. So he says, as of today, it is a fair estimate that every living person on this planet is now faced with probably 26 days between now and hell. There are potential alternatives, not many. This is now countdown. The word strategy has had two principal, competent sorts of meanings. Within the few weeks ahead, it could suddenly have no meaning at all. It is presently a very likely prospect that there might be no human beings on this planet left to live to be there. Let us, therefore, measure human reality in terms of the word strategy, when that term were employed scientifically, rather than the commonplace, actually very stupid, chronically silly voice of what remains today, for most people, as a matter of highly popular stinking opinion. Today's popular Zeusian opinion is what might, even probably, be the disease which wipes the existence of people from the planet's map. Popular opinion, that is Zeusian, today says, no, if I do not wish to believe it, it does not exist. That is what would most probably be what killed you, if there were any you still existing to be killed. That means global thermonuclear warfare. For example, Adolf Hitler's SS killers have now invaded Kiev, with strong backing from London and from many among our own jabbering Washington circles, own populist, i.e. lying opinion. Granted, Hitler is long dead, but he might just be waiting somewhere for you to join him there, wherever that is. Or perhaps you have been reading the Washington Post too often, which might be one of those habits that has been sucking the moisture out of your brain. History might not stop with a jerk, but rather with all too many jerks. Barack Obama believers, for example, or too many of the wrong kinds of Republicans, for that matter. Maybe Wall Street is today's meaning of the forthcoming towers of bubble, which means professional masturbators zealously driven by the hot-handed pursuit of intrinsically worthless Wall Street money. Not for investing, but for President Obama's sucking the common folk, dead and desiccated alike, too many people. That in ever-increasing rations per capita for diminishing numbers of once living people. I have said certain things, all wholly truthful, but perhaps too simply said, as common folk populists, for example, tend to do. Therefore, let me forewarn you, one, perhaps last time, this time in retrospect. And so, yeah, we'll stop it there, because this is what we're going to start to discuss. This is a paper everybody should read. We'll have copies printed out at the end. But what he's really attacking, and it's worth really thinking about this for a second, is that the major problem is popular opinion. It's that people don't have any sort of identity of their own. They're in a vacuum of popular opinion, where as a result, they're not looking to actually explore or understand any of their environment. It's all decided for them. And as a result, they're just going by, what they're... It's fine, there's nothing. Oh. They're just going by, the things that they've been told will give them the, desired effect, what they desire. So, you have to work to get money. So, we're working because we want money. But what is work when your whole global financial system is collapsing and is based on a giant bubble? You just want to keep saying you have to work to get money, get money so you can live? Or, where is this logic going to take you? And so what this brings me to now is that in reality, all popular opinion aside, we're headed for a nuclear war. And so I wanted to talk about that for a bit. I thought it would be the most important thing. And the first thing I'd bring up is that we published an article March 9th, 2013. And this is really a good overview. It says, U.S. moves toward nuclear first strike capability. Hello. This is what everything is hinged on. The U.S. is moving towards a first strike nuclear capability. Why would it do something like that? What does that mean? So what came out of the Strategic Studies Quarterly, which is a review published by the U.S. military, the Air Force, the university for the U.S. Air Force, is a document called The New Era of Nuclear Weapons, Deterrence and Conflict. So here, this is where they start going into talking about how the United States can organize itself to have a first strike over adversaries like Russia and China. And they refer to, there's a quote here where they're talking about a model that was done in 2006. And the model says, in 2006, Leiber and Press, the last names of the two people who did this study, modeled a hypothetical U.S. first strike against Russia. It says, the same models that were used during the Cold War to demonstrate the inescapability of stalemate, the condition of mutual assured destruction, or MAD, as it's called, now suggested that even the large Russian arsenal could be destroyed in a disarming strike. Okay, so this is what the report's looking at. The fact that now, because of the reduction in the amount of nuclear weapons that has taken place, it says here in the article, technological innovation has dramatically improved the ability of states to launch counterforce attacks. That is, military strikes aimed at disarming an adversary by destroying its nuclear weapons. Number two, they argue, is that in the coming decades, deterring the use of nuclear weapons during conventional wars will be much harder than most analysts believe. So avoiding the use of nuclear weapons in any sort of war is becoming not possible, is really the situation. And so that's why they're saying the basis for the author's argument is that very accurate delivery systems, new reconnaissance technologies, and the downsizing arsenals from Cold War levels have made both conventional and nuclear counterforce strikes against nuclear arsenals much more feasible than ever before. During the Cold War, neither the US nor the Soviet Union could launch a disarming first strike against the other because each side had so many weapons deliverable by different modes that an attempted counterforce strike could not prevent a retaliatory reply. This is no longer the case. The reduction of nuclear arsenals on both sides means there are now fewer targets to hit, especially on the Russian side. So this is actually what the U.S. whole military doctrine has become under Obama and under Bush, called prompt global strike, is they're organizing themselves to be able to destroy Russia, right? And so what's happening now? What is this? What's the Russian reaction to all this? That's what's important, because we're saying, okay, they're doing this. It doesn't necessarily mean we're headed for war or whatnot. Well, how's the other side, which is observing all this? How are they handling all of this? And well, here, what we have is. So I think it's important. Everybody should read this article. I want to really get it across that, what's actually happening. Popular opinion aside, what are the facts? What's really being said on both sides? On May 3rd, 2012, then Chief of the Russian Armed Forces General Staff General Nikolai Makarov declared that further advances in the development of the ballistic missile defense system by the United States and NATO in Europe would so greatly threaten Russia's security as to necessitate a preemptive attack on such installations. The outbreak of military hostilities between the USA and Russia would mean nuclear war. So he goes on to say, considering the destabilizing nature of the ballistic missile defense systems, specifically the creation of the illusion of being able to inflict a disarming first strike without retaliation, a decision on the preemptive use of available offensive weapons will be taken during the period of an escalating situation. What Makarov was pointing out is that ostensibly defensive systems can be used in offensive warfare, in this case to enable the West to launch a preemptive first strike without fear of retaliatory response. Okay, so they're building these missile shields. I want to show the picture of that, of the map. All around Russia and China, you have these systems being put in place. Just have to find it. Yeah, here it is. Everybody see that? Now this is published in our new special report for the Committee for the Republic of Canada, which we want everybody to pick up. You can buy these on your way out. Ukraine, the cockpit for thermonuclear World War III, going through the ins and outs of where the world stands now that the whole financial system has collapsed. And it's just waiting to, give its final breath. It's dying, it's dead, but the person may still have one or two breaths left before they go down and drag everything with it. So you guys see that all the blue dots on the Russian side, the Western, Eastern Europe side, are missile systems in Poland, in Romania, radars in Turkey, and we can make this a bit more, The one gap, they're bringing 4 Aegis missile destroyer systems, huge ships with these huge missile systems that are able to, be launched at Russia to knock out, their second strike capability. Ukraine is the only thing that's, really between Russia and all these systems. And this is where we're seeing all the action is breaking out right now, right in Ukraine. And so is it really, as we're told, because the Ukrainian people are fighting for democracy and they want to join the European Union, which is completely bankrupt, because that's going to bring them a future, joining the bankrupt European Union where they don't get to decide anything anymore and they're placed under the military control of NATO? That's called freedom, where they have to go through all these what's called these compact economic reforms that are all dictated by the IMF, because the IMF has a great track record of helping nations develop, right? So we want to join that. We want them to help us. So the big thing here is that, okay, so you have these missile shields being built. What is the U.S. saying in response to what Russia is saying? the U.S. is saying they're not against you. It's for Iran. In case Iran wants to attack Europe or us or anybody, we have these missile shields there to defend against Iranian missiles. So the Russians said, okay, well, we have a great solution. Why don't you work with us? Why don't we collaborate on these missile shields so that we can, help keep safe from Iran? And the U.S. and NATO said, no, that's okay. And it's really, it's really shocking because Russia proposed to, you can put it in a lot more strategic places with Russia's cooperation on Russian territories and whatnot that you can't if you're just depending on Europe. Look at where Iran is. Iran's all the way here. So, if you have Russia's help, you're able to place them in an area that, is a lot closer to Iran if it's about Iran and not on Russia's borders, right? It doesn't seem to be the best place. So, with that said, this is actually the big paradox, because then it's not about Iran. So the U.S. is lying. They're just in their face lying. And if Iran is not really what they're worried about, and it's Russia, why? Does that mean Russia's an enemy? There's a danger of a confrontation with Russia? What would be the reason for that? Everybody is saying, oh, we're past this age of big wars, world wars. Those happened like really long ago. These things are not possible today. But then the question is, what's with the whole military policy of wanting to knock out Russia's second strike capability? And that's where this is what Matthew's going to get into in one sense or another, is that it's because it's not the nations making the decisions. It's an oligarchy. It's a few ruling class families who control through different agents of influence in the establishments. They control policy making, right? And so one of the big things that we do in all our intelligence reports that we've done over the last 40 years is identify who these agents of influence are, who are Satan's little helpers, if you will, that are creating situations that take us into world wars, that take us into great famines, right, all across Africa, in the past, there's many examples. So that's where I had a fun discussion. I just give a few anecdotes. We organize every day. We have political tables, and so we talk to a lot of people, and we get a first-hand sense of what do people actually think, different kinds of people from different backgrounds. And I was discussing with a contact of ours, Francois Cote, and we were talking about this question of evil, that most people, there's not many evil people in this world, people that actually have no problem, condemning millions of Africans to starvation just to carry out, just to save them from some identity crisis of no longer being a ruling class or something because Africa chooses to develop. So they're willing to kill as many people as possible and assassinate as many presidents and high officials to continue their racket. So that means that there is a conspiracy by a few folks to do these kind of things. And most people have trouble with that because that's to say that there are actually evil people in this world that have evil intentions. And my contact Francois, he brought up a point of after the Nazi occupation of Germany in the war, there was an event where one of the victims of the concentration camps and all that in court wanted to meet, I want to finally come face to face with the perpetrators of these crimes against humanity. I want to see what an evil person looks like. What kind of person could do that? And they have the images of the burning fires, right, of all the smoke, which are all the corpses of thousands and thousands of people. They say, what is this person going to look like? And guess what? When the person finally came face to face with one of these Nazi, probably guards or whatever, he broke down because the guy looked just like him. He looked just like a normal person. And he was expecting to find, like in Hollywood, the way we sell this idea of like the evil, genius or the crazy doctor that has some plan for world government or for world domination, or the guy that makes a deal with Satan and Satan's all kind of, you know, like, hey, this is not the best guy to be, you know, cutting deals with. No, he looked like an average person, right? So what you have is, it's not a question of, you know, it's not a physical issue. It's a question of there's an identity of a certain ruling class, and you have a mass of people who have the identity of slaves. And the slave says, there's nothing you can do. You can't change things, right? You just have to learn to make your way, take care of yourself, take care of your family and your friends, but don't start getting yourself into trouble, God forbid. Then you're going to get your family into trouble. You're going to get other people into trouble that you care about. Don't you care about them? Do you really want them to get hurt? What are you doing? Are you stupid? You need to get your degree. You know, you have to say the things that are going to allow you to go somewhere, and stop saying the things that just get you into fights for the truth. And, oh, how do you know you have the truth? No, so it becomes this big thing where the society comes down. Everybody has like a police in their own head, where they get very upset when they hear remarks that bring into question this idea of, you know, shouldn't we be doing something? And people really get upset, and they say, no, there's nothing you can do. And this is my second anecdote, where I was at Université de Montreal, and I met this French guy. And I just say French guy because in general the French can be very cynical, you know, like, oh, there's nothing you can do. But yet, you know, they're acknowledging how bad the world is, and they're just, so that their identity is just they're finding a way to play the system and survive. And when I told him, look, we stopped the war in Syria, the highest levels of the US military, of the Russian government, the Chinese government, these are all networks that LaRouche, our organization, has been working with for decades. And LaRouche has been the eminent forecaster who has foreseen all these crises that are now the sword hanging over them. LaRouche was telling them the sword was over you. You're next, because of the breakdown of the world system and all that. And the oligarchy would go to psychotic, suicidal, measures to remain in power. And he said that's what you can't underestimate, that these guys are willing to risk a nuclear war, if necessary, to stay in control, because they've run out of options. And that's the thing, the financial system has gone bankrupt. And you have some of the highest level officials now. Bush's secretary, Treasury Secretary, Hank Paulson, just came out a few days ago, and he was pretty, serious about the fact that we're back where we were in 2008 before the collapse. The financial system could collapse tomorrow. And he said, in fact, it's a lot worse because all these banks which had originally been in crisis, they have a lot more debts now, right? They have a lot more mortgages, bad mortgages, and all these things that the US had given them money to keep holding. So they're holding way more now. And they have a lot more leverage, and so the fall is a lot higher than it was in 2007. So I told this guy that, look, the empire's bankrupt. We have an opportunity right now to organize a new alliance of nations to replace this dead imperial system. But we have to organize people, you know. And then I just had he was questioning the idea that we were able to stop the war in Syria. And I just told him how it was done. The chief of staff of the US military, what's the role of the US military in relation to the president, who's the commander-in-chief? The military is there to give them options, right? So the president wants to do something. He says, I'd like to have an invasion in Syria. What can you make up for me as a plan? And well, what did Dempsey do? Well, he was giving impossible scenarios. He kept giving scenarios that were saying, essentially, you won't be able to do this war without getting authorization from Congress, because it means this, we can be attacked like this and like that and like that. And all the logistics and support means that you have to declare war. Because Obama was trying to bypass getting authorization and just launch a war like he did in Libya. Again, so this is just like an emperor. He just called for a war and it happened, but there was no discussion. And so one of our colleagues, Representative Walter Jones, he had put a bill in the U.S. Congress that says any president who authorizes a military force without the authorization of Congress will be impeached. And so Obama was caught in a situation where he had given the order for a strike on Syria, but he was blocked because of the fact that he knew if he were actually to go forward with this, he would be impeached. And we got word of this where even Netanyahu had been told that there was going to be a strike on Syria, and Obama had to call him back 48 hours later and say the call's off, the strike's off, so there's not going to be a strike. Right? This was reported in his Israeli press. So just to show that Obama had already told people ahead of time he was going to do it, and so he had to retrace his steps and go back to them and say the plan has changed. So the oligarchy really is stuck, and that's why it takes us to Ukraine, where what you really have is these Nazi, literally right-wing hardcore Nazis that date back to when Hitler had occupied Ukraine. As I just want to show you these pictures because they're... Yeah, no, it's like... Well, number one, here, if you guys can see this, this is the Hitler Youth, but this is 2013, right? They've got Stefan Bandera, who was the lead organizer of for the Nazis in Ukraine before they invaded, to get the whole movement together and form the paramilitary groupings and whatnot necessary to enforce Nazi occupation. So they're marching with his face, and actually the logo the guy has there on his shirt is the Nazi symbol. Is like the swastika, as you can see. That was their version of the symbol. And just to go down, because who's supporting these things, right? My point about the anecdote with the French guy, just to get back to it, is that I said, we can stop the empire. And he said, no, you can't. Look at all the, how are you going to do that? They control the money and all that. And I said, no, the problem is people are stupid. I said, that's the problem. It's people are believing lies. They're being told that there's nothing you can do. The gods of Olympus, the gods of Wall Street control everything. I said, the problem is they're stupid. And his reaction was very interesting. He said, how can you say that? How can you say everybody's stupid? You're being disrespectful. That's what he told me. He said I was being disrespectful for saying, I said the average person is stupid. That's their problem. Like, I want to change things. That's why I'm saying we have to acknowledge that the average person has no clue about what's going on. So the point is that you need a movement to educate people, because it's not that they're evil. There's only a few evil people. It's that they're stupid and they don't have an identity. So they're not reacting to reality, right? So we have to help them form that. Here you have neo-Nazi Svoboda thugs at the forefront of the Ukrainian protests. I just love this picture because, what else? This is past rallies.
That's the wife of the former prime minister, the former president of Ukraine, Yushchenko.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wife of the former prime minister. 1989 Nazi rally of the Ukrainian National Alliance Party. They're all giving the Hitler salute. This is, the United States and Europe are backing Nazis, literally Nazis. I want to show you one more thing. It's coming. Another doofus. That's their march. Oh yeah, they're big heroes. Stefan Bandera. Look, this is a lot of people, right? People saying, oh, the media keeps playing it out. Oh, this is just a few people. We don't want to. We're not going to have a movement for democracy stifled just because there's a few delinquents and radicals. No, it's giant masses. It's like 10,000 people. These are the estimates of hardcore Nazi supporters. This is Ole Tyahnybach, let's say, gives the Nazi salute at a recent Svoboda event. Svoboda is one of the major opposition parties that the Ukrainian government is supposed to negotiate with. This is John McCain meeting him, right? The U.S. has sent high-level officials, high State Department officials, senior senators, all to go support these guys. Svoboda's Nazi youth paramilitary wing models themselves directly on Nazi SS. That's their flag. This is what we're literally supporting, right? And there's their friends, who are all ecstatic about joining the European Union. And as we see above, because this is getting to the point of all this, the other fellow up here, leader of the opposition groups, Natalie Klitschko, has already expressed his intention to bring Ukraine into NATO. Here he poses with the NATO logo, right? So they're very explicit about what they want to do. So you're keeping in mind what the United States and NATO military policy is right now of encircling Russia and China, trying to isolate Russia, where the first condition for Ukraine to join European Union is cut off all economic ties with Russia, because you're going to have to agree to these comprehensive free trade agreements, which means you can't have negotiations with other nations like that, because that's constraining the trade, that's impeding the trade. So you have to give those up if you want to be our slave. And so I just think it's interesting because, look, we're the United States, the West is on the wrong side in Syria. They're backing jihadists, right? The people who will eat the heart of a soldier, literally cannibals, who are cutting peoples up in all sorts of different ways. And we're backing that against the government in Syria. And we're backing Nazis, especially the United States, the Obama administration and the European Union in Ukraine. So what good is people's opinion if they're not actually looking at this? Wasn't Hitler a bad thing? Didn't we say never again? Aren't these the things that we're supposed to, everybody's supposed to like come out and say, no, we're not going there. But no, people are being told this is for democracy and so people are stupid. And they really need to read this report. They really need to be educated by people like ourselves who have access to this knowledge and who understand what the game is. And to realize my last anecdote that I just bring, and I'll be closing it up, is that I was at Dawson College with my friend Pascal, and we met a young man who he was talking about the masses rising up. And he says, this is how things are going to change. The masses are going to come, and you know, they are the people, the masses. So what he's saying is the popular opinion that these people all share. This is what we have to defend, right? We have to defend, what people think on all these different issues. And what we tried to get through to him is exactly that, hey, hang on a second. If you look at all the great movements from the American Revolution, the Golden Renaissance, it's a few people that organize these. It's ideas, right? It has to be a movement of ideas which is able to resonate in people's minds and elevate people, right? That you really trust the average person on the street to lead a revolution right now, right? What does the person have in mind about developing Africa or their own country? Do they have any sort of economic policy as we do? And they don't. So what are they talking about democracy and freedom and all that? They don't have a plan. They have no clue. And so we're going to have a deliberation among a mass of opinions, and this is going to decide the future of humanity? No, it has to be based on truth. And so he ended up freaking out because he said that I was talking about the privileged white man class. He was of an Aboriginal background, and saying that having governments where you have representatives, he said that's a privileged system. And the whole point is, I said, well, you have to go organize them. Of course, they're in their office. You have to go talk to them. You have to call them. Everybody has to be following what's going on. So they have to know what the issues are. They have to know about World War III if we're going to talk about World War III, right? We have to identify who the agents of influence are that represent the empire, that are infiltrating our institutions, our education institutions, as you'll see with Matthew. We have to know who these people are. Otherwise, we're completely helpless against this evil conspiracy which is really to, now that the whole system has collapsed, go for world government and go for the only kind of financial dictatorship which can allow the oligarchy to control under chaos situations. Because when everybody gets crazy and there's no more food coming to the supermarkets, people start looting everything. Government buildings will be raided, as there start in Ukraine, and there is no control. And the statistic is, after 3 million people, the military has no control. Right? There are 3 million plus in the streets. There's nothing you can do. The military is neutralized. So it's only through a dictatorship, through Nazi-style guns, killing, torture, intimidation, that you can have the kind of atmosphere of fear where you can control the population. And this is what they're implementing. This is what's going on in Ukraine, because they want to put the missiles in Ukraine. So this is what Ukraine's all about. It's really, now that the showdown is finally here, Russia and China have to be eliminated in the eyes of the oligarchy if they're to go for this, because you have Eurasia right now. Is your PowerPoint up, Matthew? No? You have the nations of Eurasia, which have gone for a policy of growth and of development, and Ukraine decided to join that. So you have a new bloc in Asia and Eastern Europe. You have Belarus, you have all these other countries which are looking in that direction because there's growth, and they can work with these countries. They can't work with their neighbors right now. Like Germany, it can't really work with the other nations of the European Union because they're all locked into bailing out the dead banks, the oligarchical system. So as long as Germany stays there, they won't get anything moving. So they're forced to go see their friends in Eurasia if they want to survive. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think the oligarchy is going to do? Can they allow this? And that's why just to cut it short, at the end of the day, what this all means is that if we don't, what our colleagues are doing right now in the United States is pushing to get Obama out, because Obama is the control for the oligarchy of the United States. And as soon as this guy is kicked out, keep in mind he's backing Nazis, right? The U.S. policy right now is the support of Nazis in Ukraine. This is grounds for impeachment. So that's what we're putting on the table again. And this is what I mean by intervening. You have to say what's true, and you have to put that on the table, and you have to give a chance to all these officials, the masses, to react to truth. Because everywhere they go, what they're encountering is not truth, is the media, is the education system, is a vacuum of already decided information which you're just supposed to take. So you have to give them the truth, which means we have to organize people as we do all across the world with our political tables, get people to our events, and get people, just like the bad guys, infiltrating the schools, and I don't mean in a secretive way, but actually going into the schools, having the events, starting the movements, organizing the unions around this global policy, the LaRouche policy, to form a new economic system so that we don't have to see the economies disintegrate and thus create a situation where the trigger for nuclear war is pressed for any amount of different disagreements, because there'll be no society. The economy will have collapsed, so there's no more international law. If there's a dispute over water, United States right now has big water problems, Middle East has big water problems, Africa has big water problems. These are grounds for a war in an age of nuclear weapons. So I'd leave it at that and just really make the point that, as LaRouche is warning, this is extinction warfare. There's, as the quotes in this military article make the point, there's no way to have a non-confrontation if you're pushing Russia into a corner. They're forced to retaliate if these systems take out their ability to defend themselves. They have to knock them out first. So the ballistic missile systems are in their second phase, and in their fourth phase they become offensive. So what Makarov said is that we have to knock them out if we're going to do it before they reach their fourth phase. So they don't really have much time to do it. Are they going to do it? Well, it all depends on, is Ukraine going to collapse under these Nazi right-wing takeovers? If the government collapses and goes to the European Union and NATO, this is what's going to happen. So that's why we have to really get Obama out because of this backing of the Nazis now, which means that the Ukrainian situation can be stabilized and the alliances can be formed for development. Because that's the real problem. We don't have any more development. And so people are getting desperate. So I leave it at that. These articles, we're going to have them on the war danger and all that, and these reports at our literature table at the end. So you guys can get all this stuff and show to yourself, why this is true, and therefore let's get to the solutions. Let's give everybody a loving kick in the behind and say, hey, let's get out of this mess. I believe it was like February 4th or something, and he basically said, you should be acting like right now there's like a 26-day countdown, the month of February, towards a sort of, breakout of conflict, an extinction conflict. That's really where LaRouche is saying you have to keep your eyes open. This thing is, unfolding now. And as we're going to see with the developments in Ukraine and all that, that's exactly the case. But I'd start just by reading this, and LaRouche is being a bit, he's being very straightforward in a sense. So he says, as of today, it is a fair estimate that every living person on this planet is now faced with probably 26 days between now and hell. There are potential alternatives, not many. This is now countdown. The word strategy has had two principal competent sorts of meanings. Within the few weeks ahead, it could suddenly have no meaning at all. It is presently a very likely prospect that there might be no human beings on this planet left to live to be there. Let us, therefore, measure human reality in terms of the word strategy, when that term were employed scientifically, for that matter. Maybe Wall Street is today's meaning of the forthcoming towers of bubble, which means professional masturbators zealously driven by the hot-handed pursuit of intrinsically worthless Wall Street money. Not for investing, but for President Obama's sucking the common folk, dead and desiccated alike, too many people. That in ever-increasing rations per capita for diminishing numbers of once living people. I have said certain things, all wholly truthful, but perhaps too simply said, as common folk, populists, for example, tend to do. Therefore, let me forewarn you, one, perhaps last time, this time in retrospect. And so, yeah, we'll stop it there, because this is what we're going to start to discuss. This is a paper everybody should read. We'll have copies printed out at the end. But what he's really attacking, and it's worth really thinking about this for a second, is that the major problem is popular opinion. It's that people don't have any sort of identity of their own. They're in a vacuum of popular opinion, where as a result, they're not looking to actually explore or understand any of their environment. It's all decided for them. And as a result, they're just going by, what they're, it's fine, there's nothing, they're just going by, the things that they've been told will give them the, desired effect, what they desire. So, you have to work to get money. So, we're working because we want money. But what is work when your whole global financial system is collapsing and is based on a giant bubble? You just want to keep saying you have to work to get money, so you can live? Or, where is this logic going to take you? And so what this brings me to now is that in reality, all popular opinion aside, we're headed for a nuclear war. And so I wanted to talk about that for a bit. I thought it would be the most important thing. And the first thing I'd bring up is that we published an article March 9th, 2013. And this is really a good overview. It says, U.S. moves toward nuclear first strike capability. Hello. This is what everything is hinged on. The U.S. is moving towards a first strike nuclear capability. Why would it do something like that? What does that mean? So what came out of the Strategic Studies Quarterly, which is a review published by the U.S. military, the Air Force, typically, rather than the commonplace, actually very stupid, chronically silly voice of what remains today, for most people, as a matter of highly popular stinking opinion. Today's popular Zeusian opinion is what might, even probably, be the disease which wipes the existence of people from the planet's map. Popular opinion, that is Zeusian, today says, no, if I do not wish to believe it, it does not exist. That is what would most probably be what killed you, if there were any you still existing to be killed. That means global thermonuclear warfare. For example, Adolf Hitler's SS killers have now invaded Kiev, with strong backing from London and from many among our own jabbering Washington circles, own populist, i.e. lying opinion. Granted, Hitler is long dead, but he might just be waiting somewhere for you to join him there, wherever that is. Or perhaps you have been reading the Washington Post too often, which might be one of those habits that has been sucking the moisture out of your brain. History might not stop with a jerk, but rather with all too many jerks. Barack Obama believers, for example, or too many of the wrong kinds of Republicans. Welcome everybody to the CRC weekly meeting. Today is February 9th, 2014. And we've got a lot to do, a lot to cover, so we'll try and do that in a strategic fashion. The first thing I'd point out, judging by our audience as well, who decided to come today, LaRouche has been really attacking this point of popular opinion, that people are really victims of their own opinions that somebody has basically put in their head. These are not. We're not the average population. We're not talking about sovereign people. We're not talking about people who have the ability to generate their own concepts. We're talking about people who reference and refer to certain, bodies, the official bodies and the standard reviews and takes on different things going on in the world. And this is how they shape their worldview. They don't have the ability for themselves to generate, a concept that allows them to understand the world. They get it from somewhere. And that's the big problem. So I'd really start by just reading the opening of LaRouche's latest paper called Countdown. And